What's up guys, Asian here again with another video, and today is one that's actually been, I probably should have made this a long time ago, but today we're going to be taking a look at what I consider to be the top 5 must-have add-ons for raiding / endgame PvE trials. These 5 add-ons are basically ones that you pretty much need to have no matter what role you are in and what trial you are doing. These add-ons will definitely help you out in terms of either learning the mechanics or kind of perfecting your rotation or some other sort of additional feature that ends up being incredibly useful in these sort of trial scenarios. Now, these are not necessarily all the add-ons that you're going to need. Obviously, there are some either trial-specific or even class-specific add-ons that you might want to grab, but hopefully these 5 add-ons will give you an idea of what you should be looking for when it comes to add-ons you want to use if you want to get into PvE endgame, so trial content. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. So like I said, these are the top 5 add-ons that I think are pretty much key to have as a endgame raider. So the first one is going to be Action Duration Reminder. This is an incredibly powerful tool to have, and is actually really helpful even after you've kind of mastered your rotation, to really just keep an eye on all of your dots, all of your buffs and things like that. So Action Duration Reminder, how it works is, for a lot of you guys have asked, what are the timers down the bottom next to my skill bar down here? Where are they? What add-on does it come from? That's what Action Duration Reminder does. So it does 2 things. The first one is it actually adds a timer on the abilities. So if here, when I go ahead and use my abilities, both buffs and damage abilities, you see the timer starting to count down. That just basically counts down how long each buff has until it runs out, or each dot, or each heal over time ability. Now, it's still a little bit weird with some abilities. So for example, if you double cast, let's say mutagen, it will not necessarily track the earliest mutagen. Instead, it'll track the latest mutagen that you cast. So it's not entirely accurate if you're using it to keep track of something like mutagen or something like that. Fetcher infection on the Magicka Warden, that one's a little bit weird. Sometimes it won't necessarily register down at the bottom there with the timers, but it's typically very reliable, and again, it does keep track of both buffs and damage over times and heal over time abilities. So it's very useful to have, and it will persist when you bar swap. So again, if I were just to use all these abilities and bar swap here, you will see that Action Duration Reminder pretty much puts it on top of the current skill bar here, just as a reminder for you. So you can see here that it run out, and it'll actually continue to blink for a little bit. You can set the duration that it's on there for a little bit in the add-on settings, and it'll basically, it's just a reminder that, hey, your dot ran out, you need to reapply it. You'll also notice that when the dot is about to run out here, I also get a notification on screen as well, just with the name of the ability as well as the picture of the ability itself. So I have this set to 2 seconds, so you can see here now, Endless Hail, then Caltrops right after that, and also play a sound for you as well. So really nice to get sort of an audio visual cue as well as to when you want to when you need to re-up your dots. Like I mentioned, you can kind of change these around in the add-on settings here, so you can change where you want the kind of pop-up to be at, if you want it at all, whether you how long it takes before it ends up popping up. So here's a pop-up alert. So for example, you can have it anywhere from 0 to 3 seconds, and how long you want it to show for. So if I have it to show for 2 seconds before the dot runs out, so it's up there for that size. I also put in keywords as well, and this here is the shift bar, which is the timer down at the bottom there. The next add-on I want to mention here, that I use Bandits UI along with Azura and Dark UI as my UI add-on, but I highly recommend that you pick up one additional UI add-on. The base game defaults UIs is not all that great, in my opinion. It doesn't have the kind of minute detail that you might need that you would want to have in a raid. You know, how much health you have, how much magicka you have, specifically down to the actual numbers rather than just sort of a visual indicator. So I highly recommend you pick up a UI add-on. A lot of these also come packaged with some other neat features. So Bandits is really nice. It has its own sort of buff debuff tracker as well if you want to use that, and so really helpful to get one of these UIs. So again, I like Bandits. However, there are a couple of other ones. There's AUI, there's LUI Extended. so on and so forth. But I highly recommend you pick up at least one of the UIs. So this is kind of a second one. It's a little bit of a cop-out because it's just generic UI add-ons, but it is, in my opinion, very important to have a nice, clean or UI that you can follow. So everybody sort of it absorbs information a little bit differently. So I have had feedback from a couple of people who watch my streams that, hey, my UI seems a little bit cluttered, but for me, it all makes sense. So for me, it seems very organized and I can know where I need to look for certain things. So again, just kind of play around with the different UI add-ons that are out there until you find one that really sort of meets well with your sort of method of information gathering. Number 3, without any question, is going to be comment metrics. Comment metrics. And I'm also going to include constellations with this because you kind of can't talk about one without the other. So comment metrics and constellations are very important add-ons to have. Even if you're not going to be a DPS, comment metrics is very useful as a healer and tank because it'll also provide you with buff and debuff up times as well. So if you guys haven't seen a comment metrics report yet, this is the new comment metrics that is on the forums. There is an older version that's on esoui.com/minion, but this is the latest one, so this one has a couple of features that Solinar wants us to kind of play around with. But here is what comment metrics is able to provide for you. So this is just an example of a parse that we did with, I think this is a raid parse that we did. Yeah, so we do have some foreign uptime and things like that. So you can see exactly what buffs that you're getting. So getting almost 100% uptime on minor sorcery. You can see we are not getting 100% rest of Warhorn uptime, so we need to work on that particularly. And you can see what debuffs are going out. So if you're a tank, you can see just how much uptime you're getting on Crusher, how much uptime you're getting on Alkosh with Linebreaker, how much off-balance uptime you have. So this is very important tool to have in order to kind of diagnose where you can improve as a healer, as a tank. And of course, obviously as a DPS as well. It gives you the exact DPS that you're pulling, how much a percent it is compared to the group. So you can see here I did 12.8% of the DPS, of the group DPS. You can break down where your sources of DPS are coming from, how many of them crits, so on and so forth. You can even take a look at how much regen and drain you're getting, which abilities actually draining the most. So you can see here final health is draining the most amount of magicka, followed by blockade of fire, so on and so forth here. It'll also give you spell crit damage, penetration. So you can see here I'm underpenning here even with my max, so I do need to shift a few points in spell pen here. If this was like my build, for example, this is quite an old parse actually, and the game even tell you how much you're over penetrating by. Now with this new version, you can also look at healing done, damage received, healing received. So these are all very, very useful. Again, as healers, healing done, you can see how much healing you're doing. Healing received, how much healing you're getting as a tank. Damage received, this can help diagnose where damage is coming from, where your deaths are from potentially as a tank. Then you also have things like a combat log, which is not here because this is an old parse. You can have graphs. Again, this is an old parse, so you don't have to see this here, so you can kind of see where your DPS fluctuates over time. You can even have info here. Again, not all of this is built out because, again, this is an older parse. You can even see how much time that you're spent on the front bar compared to the back bar, your actual build itself. This was the build that I used for this particular parse, your CP setups, things like that. So really, really powerful tool here, not just for DPS, but also for support roles as well, just for the debuff and buff uptime as well. Then of course, Constellations is here mainly for DPS, so you guys are able to import your comment metrics report and automatically fill this out. You can adjust your penetrations accordingly, all these percentages you can see here. It doesn't have any sort of data for conduit, so I'd have to add that in myself. And then it'll basically, you go over to the champion points tab and it'll tell you what your ideal champion points would be for this particular damage distribution. So if I were to calculate this out, it would basically tell me how many points I would need to shift out of certain CP nodes, put them in a certain CP node. So you can see here it's basically telling me you need to take some points out of, let's see, 3 points out of Thaumaturge, put them into here. So this is an old parse, so this is not up to date with the current number of CPs I have. So you can see here, it's basically telling me this is the CP that you had, this is the CP that you want, and this is how much it would increase your DPS by in terms of this sort of F factor. So very, very important if you want to help maximize your overall DPS. Comment metrics and constellations both kind of combined together. Moving on here, now we're just going to scroll quite a ways down now. Where is it? R. All the way down to R. So add-on number 4 that you should have is going to be Raid Notifier. This is definitely a tool that you want to have on hand. Not not just as a raid lead, but just in general. Raid Notifier is an incredibly powerful tool. That is what's giving us our pop-ups that you see whenever I stream any raids. So if you go over here to the add-ons menu and take a look at Raid Notifier here, it first tool that it does have this sort of warhorn sharing, so you can see everybody's percentage up to the warhorns. So this is nice for raid leads, so you can coordinate warhorns as well as support roles. But the big thing comes down here from notifications for each trial. So you have, for each individual trial, does not have Sunspire yet. Sunspire is still on the PTS, and there might be some tweaks, but it has all the trials in the game, including the arenas. So Dragonstar, Maelstrom. I don't believe he has Black Rose Prison on here yet, but you have all the others. So you can see here under Hell Ra, you have for your Kata Kai, the Meteors, you have the Stone Form from the Warrior Hard mode, Theoran Archive, same thing here. You have a couple of notifications for the Storm Atro, for the mobs, for Call Lightning Overcharge, and so on and so forth. So each individual trial has its own notification that you can turn on or off, even customize it too. So you can, for example, here the Poison Phase, you can turn it off if you don't want to know any of it. Or you can turn it to normal, which will just tell you when the poison phase starts, or you can do full, which will tell you when the poison phase starts, as well as whether you're getting Lamias or a Manticore after the poison phase. So very, very powerful tool, especially when you're starting to learn in a progression group what mechanics are happening, so that way you can recognize it, you know, the animations, and you don't necessarily need to pay any attention anymore to the sort of Raid Notifier pop-ups. I still highly recommend using this, even if you know the mechanics of the trial already, just because it's always nice to kind of be aware of, hey, this mechanic is going to happen, so that way you're not bogged down in kind of mastering your rotation and doing your rotation in the middle of a trial. So very, very important add-on to have. I highly recommend you get this if you intend on raiding. I would not necessarily rely upon it because, again, even though it will tell you, hey, this mechanic is happening, you still need to know what to do with the mechanics. Now, some of these pop-ups will tell you what you need to do. So, for example, Threshing Wings in Rakat, it'll tell you that Threshing Wings is happening, and it'll also tell you to block. That is not the case for all the different mechanics. So, for example, for the Twins fight, it'll tell you when you are converting from dark to light, but it will not tell you how to swap. That is on the raid lead to figure out how to swap, whether you're doing clockwise around the edge or some variation thereof. And it will also not necessarily, and it will not obviously move you for you. You still need to actually go out and move. So don't rely on this to tell you what to do for the mechanics. It'll just tell you, hey, the mechanic is happening. So it is still on you to learn what the mechanics look like, know what the mechanics do, and how to deal with the mechanics, but Raid Notifier will definitely make it easier for you to recognize when that mechanic is happening. Definitely something that I would highly recommend you pick up. And the fifth and final add-on I would recommend you pick up is going to be Surrendar. So Surrendar is a very powerful tool to have. It is pretty much very similar to Action Duration Reminder, but it provides a little bit of additional functionality as well. So Surrendar is very similar to Action Duration Reminder. It basically tracks the duration of your dots, your buffs, everything that you would possibly want to track can be tracked via Surrendar here. Now, Surrendar is a very beefy tool, and it takes a while in order to really calibrate it to what you ideally want to have. So the filters that you want to have, so for example here under the prominent buff and AoE assignments, it takes a while to know which ones you want to have down. So this is the list of one list that I have of auras. I think I have any here. So it does take a little bit of time to kind of figure out, okay, these are the ones that I want to track. So for example, I make sure I want to track Minor Berserk, I want to make sure I track Major Courage, I want to make sure I'm tracking Major Vitality as well. And you can see here that you will need to know the Aura ID is what this is called. It's basically a string of numbers that correspond to some sort of buff or debuff, and you can find a lot of these by going into the Surrendar files, opening up one of the LUA files, and just searching for the specific ID. Other option too is you can also turn on in combat metrics. So once you finish a fight, for example, you can look at combat metrics and it'll tell you specifically what ID. Alternatively, you can just turn everything on in Surrendar, and there is an option to show the ID here under the debug, so you can just hit display or ability ID, and you can just write them all down and then turn them all off and then filter them out accordingly. So Surrendar is a very strong tool to have, and I'd like to use it in combination with Action Duration Reminder because sometimes one of them might end up bugging out, and it's nice to have a backup here. So Srendar, again, is very customizable, but it's also very robust, so you will need to play around with it in order to kind of get it to do what you want it to do. So for example, you can see here that I do have, or the enhanced housing tools, you can see here I do have Dubious Command and Throne and the anniversary buff. So my long buffs, I have them, some of them displayed, not all of them. And if I were to, for example, go ahead and put down my dots, you can see here I have my ground dots displayed right above my my health bars there, my attribute bars. And if I were getting buffs like Major Courage or Minor Courage, they would also show up. I believe I have them showing up right next to my long buff, so they'd be showing up over here, so I can keep track of them that way. So I don't have it to track everything, but I do have to track certain things, which are very nice to have. So for example, if you want to track Major Courage so you know when to step back into the old remake circle, you can certainly do that. You can also track your sorority stacks if you want to. So there's a lot of flexibility that you can do with Srendar here, and I like to combine it again with Action Duration Reminder to give myself a little bit of sort of a fallback system in case Action Duration Reminder ends up being bugged. In addition, Srendar is typically going to be more robust when it comes to patch versus Action Duration Reminder, which might not necessarily do so. So it's a little bit more consistent if the add-ons are a little bit slow to update. So that is it. Those are my 5 must-have add-ons for raiding. Obviously, there are a lot of other add-ons that you should be picking up as raiders as well. So a couple of examples that you might want to pick up. Raid tools is nice if you are a raid lead because it does give you sort of a timer and you can go back and check your history, see who's dying to what. Rip filter is very strong for a similar reason. You can see what people are dying to. If you're a tank, you kind of want to have it. You kind of want to have Untaunted if you're a tank, for example. Use the ones you want to pick up. Holder Reflex is a nice one for both DPS and support roles to have, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different ones you can pick up. Cooldowns is another good one for tanks. But those are the 5 top ones that I would say you should definitely have as a raider. Action Duration Reminder. Some sort of UI, doesn't necessarily need to be bandits, but some sort of UI add-on. Combat Metrics and Constellations, that's number 3. Number 4 would be down. Number 4 would be Raid Notifier, and number 5 would be Srendar. So those are the ones that I would say you must have as a raider. Links down in the description below to ESO UI so you can manually update them. So I prefer to manually download and manually update my add-ons. Of course, you can also use Minion as well, but I find it to be a little bit better to kind of know how to manually install them as well in case there are any sort of hot fixes or updates outside of ESO UI/Minion that might fix certain functionalities. That's it for this video. Hope you guys found this informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.